There is a quiet trembling inside the human heart, a trembling that appears not in moments of danger, but in moments of tenderness. When someone looks at you with genuine understanding, when their attention lingers long enough to touch the parts of you you thought were invisible. Being seen sounds simple. It sounds desirable. It sounds like the very thing the lonely heart longs for. Yet when it begins to happen, something inside you pulls back. Your breath hesitates. Your thoughts scatter. A quiet fear rises, because being seen means being uncovered. It means letting someone step past the mask you learned to wear. It means allowing them to witness the parts of you that feel unpolished, unguarded, unfinished. This is a story about that fear, the fear of being known too deeply by someone who truly sees you, the fear that makes connection feel dangerous, even when connection is exactly what you crave. This is the gentle unraveling of that fear, told softly, so the heart can stay open long enough to listen. Chapter 1. The moment someone sees you. It begins as a flicker, a subtle recognition in someone's eyes, a moment when their attention holds you instead of passing over you, when they are not simply hearing your words, but understanding the space beneath them. Some people move through life believing they are hard to read, hard to decipher, hard to truly know. They have spent years perfecting a way of being that reveals only what feels safe, only what feels manageable, only what cannot be used against them. Then someone arrives who does not treat their surface as the whole story. Someone who senses emotion in the pauses between sentences. Someone who notices the tremble behind the practiced calm. Someone who hears the truth hidden under the explanation. This kind of seeing is quiet, but powerful. It is not intrusive. It is attentive. It is gentle, but penetrating. It makes the guarded heart feel exposed, even when nothing painful has been revealed. In that moment, the instinctive response is to pull away, to make a joke, to change the subject, to close some invisible door. Not because you dislike the person, but because their presence feels too accurate, too intimate, too close. The feeling is not fear of them. It is fear of yourself in their presence. Fear that they might notice something you have not yet learned to accept. Fear that they might name something you have not dared to confront. Fear that they might hold up a mirror and show you parts you have hidden even from your own memory. The heart responds with a mix of longing and you want to lean in, but you also want to step back. You want to be understood, but you also fear what understanding requires. And so the emotional dance begins, a subtle choreography of closeness and distance. You reveal a little, then retreat. You soften, then stiffen. You allow connection, then create space. This chapter is the beginning of that dance, the moment when seeing becomes frightening, not because it is harmful, but because it is honest, because it touches a truth you are not sure you are ready to share. It is the moment the heart whispers, I want this and I fear this in the same breath. Chapter 12. Origins of your guarded hacker. One is born afraid of being seen. The fear grows slowly, shaped by early rooms, early conversations, early wounds that taught you it was safer to hide. Perhaps as a child you learned that your feelings overwhelmed others. Maybe your sadness made someone uncomfortable. Maybe your anger frightened someone. Maybe your needs were met with silence, irritation, or indifference. So you learned to tighten your expression. You learned to shorten your sentences. You learned to swallow your emotions before they reached your lips. You learned that being understood was unpredictable, and unpredictability felt dangerous. Others learned to see only the version of you that caused the least disruption, the easy one, the quiet one, the strong one, the one who handled everything alone. As the years passed, you discovered that vulnerability did not feel like connection. It felt like exposure. It felt like opening a door to a room you had been punished for entering before. You learned that people could misinterpret your honesty, misuse your softness, misunderstand your fears. That being known did not guarantee being cared for. So you built an inner world made of careful walls. You became thoughtful. You became composed. You became selective with your truth. And you survived this way. But survival is not the same as connection. Relationships formed around the parts you allowed others to see. Friendships rested on the version of you that felt safest to present. Romantic connections grew around the curated pieces you were willing to share. The deeper parts stayed hidden. The fragile parts stayed untouched. The bruised parts stayed unseen. Not because they were unworthy, but because they were unprotected. The fear of being known took root in these early experiences. It became a reflex, a quiet instinct, a way of keeping your inner world intact. This chapter reveals the origins of that reflex, The early moments that taught you to guard yourself, the subtle shaping of a heart that once opened freely and slowly learned to close. It is not weakness, it is adaptation, a way of staying safe in a world that did not always hold your vulnerability with tenderness. Chapter 3: Psychology of Emotional via Psychologist. Why to be seen deeply is not a simple emotional experience. It is a neurological, psychological, and relational event that touches every layer of the self. The brain is wired to protect what feels tender. When someone comes close enough to sense your fears, your nervous system activates, not because you are in danger, but because your inner world is being approached. The amygdala reacts to emotional exposure, the same way it reacts to physical threat. It signals caution. It sends a quiet alarm through your body that says something important is being touched. Attachment. Science explains this reaction further. People who grew up with inconsistent emotional responses often develop a sensitivity to being perceived. They expect disappointment. They expect misunderstanding. They brace for the moment connection turns into withdrawal. This creates a paradox. The desire for closeness remains strong, but the fear of closeness grows stronger. This is why someone seeing you too clearly can feel overwhelming. It activates a part of you that remembers old pains. It brings up the fear of repeating past hurts. The psychological fear of being known is often linked to shame, not the obvious kind, but the subtle kind. The kind that whispers there is something about you that must be hidden, something that might be rejected if brought into the light. And yet, another part of you longs for visibility, longs to be mirrored, longs to be understood. This tension between longing and fear is not a contradiction. It is a natural outcome of a nervous system, shaped by both connection and pain. This chapter reveals the science behind the feeling, the quiet inner mechanics that make emotional visibility feel risky. It shows that the fear is not irrational. It is learned, it is wired, it is remembered, and because it is learned, it can soften, it can shift, it can heal. Chapter 4: Inner conflict between longing and fear. Inside the guarded heart lives a delicate contradiction, a longing to be understood and a fear of being exposed. You want connection, you want to be seen, you want someone to understand the private feelings you carry alone. But when someone begins to draw close, something inside you tenses. You become cautious, discomfort rises. You may pull away without knowing why. It is the emotional pull of two opposing forces. One says let them in, the other says be careful. One says finally, someone understands. The other says, what if they hurt you once? They know too much. This internal conflict shapes how you behave in connection. You may reveal a small truth, then regret it. You may offer vulnerability, then feel exposed. You may begin to trust, then retreat into distance. You may test the person without realizing you are testing them. You may analyze every reaction, searching for signs of rejection before it happens. You may sabotage the closeness because the closeness feels dangerous, not because you do not care, but because you care too much. This conflict is not weakness. It is the emotional residue of being open in the past and being hurt for it. It is the heart saying, I want to be seen, but I want to stay safe. It is the mind saying, let them close, but only close enough to hold, not close enough to harm. It is the soul saying, I am tired of hiding, but I cannot bear to be wounded again. This chapter rests in that conflict. It does not try to fix it. It simply names it, because naming is often the first step toward understanding. The push and pull inside you is not a flaw. It is a story that has shaped your way of loving, your way of trusting, your way of being known. Chapter 5: When someone gently reaches iron. Sometimes a person arrives who senses your hesitation, someone who notices the pauses between your sentences, someone who sees the fear behind your deflection, someone who understands that your distance is not rejection, but protection. They approach slowly, they speak softly, they do not demand your truth, they do not force closeness, they do not rush your heart, they simply stay, and in their staying, something inside you begins to shift. You notice that they do not pull away when you reveal a small truth. You notice that they do not judge the parts of you feared were too complicated. You notice that they hold your vulnerability gently, as though it is something precious. This is the beginning of safety, not the dramatic kind, but the quiet kind, the kind that grows through consistency, the kind that appears when someone shows you their steadiness in small, patient ways. Slowly, your guard softens, not completely, but enough for your breath to deepen, enough for your perspective to widen. you begin to realize that being seen does not always lead to pain, that some people look at you not to measure you, but to understand you, and in their understanding, you feel something unfamiliar. You feel known without feeling exposed. You feel noticed without feeling judged. You feel understood without feeling invaded. This is the turning point, the moment when your heart realizes that the past is not the only pattern possible, that closeness can be gentle, that vulnerability can be met with care, that being known can feel like being held, not harmed. This chapter is the quiet opening, the moment when the story changes direction, when the heart takes a small but courageous step toward connection. Chapter 6. Learning to be seen without hiding. The process of letting yourself be known is not sudden. It is gradual. It is tender. It unfolds slowly, like morning light easing into a darkened room. You learn to share more of your truth, not all at once, but in small pieces. You reveal parts of your sadness, your fear, your hopes, your imperfections. At first, you wait for the familiar response, misunderstanding, judgment, disappointment, but it does not come. Instead, you are met with presence, with patience, with calm acceptance. You begin to understand that connection does not require perfection. It requires honesty, and honesty does not mean spilling everything at once. It means allowing what is real to be seen as it becomes ready to surface. You start trusting your voice again. You start trusting your emotions. You start trusting that vulnerability does not always lead to pain. In this chapter, healing is not dramatic. It is subtle. It appears in moments when you stay instead of withdrawing. When you tell the truth instead of minimizing. When you allow yourself to be held instead of pushing away comfort. When you let your guard soften, even for a breath. The fear of being known becomes less sharp, less consuming, less dominant. And in its place grows a quiet confidence. The confidence of someone who understands that their inner world is worthy of being seen, not because it is perfect, but because it is human. This chapter represents integration, the slow weaving of safety into places that once held fear. Chapter 7. Quiet freedom of letting yourself be vulnerable. The final chapter, the story settles into a gentle truth. The fear never disappears completely. It softens. It reshapes itself. It becomes something you learn to move with instead of something you run from. You begin to understand that being known is not about exposing your entire soul. It is about allowing someone to sit beside the deeper parts of you without fear. You realize that closeness is not a threat. It is a shared breath, a mutual presence, a recognition that you do not have to navigate your interior world alone. The quiet freedom comes from allowing your humanity to be visible. From letting your softness exist without apology. From letting your truth be heard without the instinct to hide. From letting your imperfections be seen and still feeling worthy of care. Being known deeply is not about surrendering control. It is about releasing the belief that you must always be guarded. It's about trusting that your inner world can be approached with tenderness. It is about recognizing that letting someone see you is not the same as losing yourself. That it is, ultimately, about receiving the connection you have always longed for but never felt safe enough to accept. This is the quiet freedom. The freedom of being understood. The freedom of being held in your truth. The freedom of being known, not despite your depth, but because of it. The story ends with a soft invitation to let yourself be seen, not all at once, but slowly. To let yourself be known, not by everyone, but by the ones who see you gently. And to remember that the parts you fear revealing are often the very parts someone will cherish most.